Welcome to the Business Brains and the Bottom Line podcast. My name is Paul DeLegro, your host today. I don't even know why I say today. I'm always the host, so I don't know what the difference is, but I am the host of the show. But my guest today is Damon Lembi. He is the CEO of Learnit, and he's also a best-selling author and also a podcast host of the Learn It All podcast. So welcome to the show, Damon.
Paul, I'm honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm honored to have you, Damon. I think we talked last week a little bit. I think we're gonna have a great show. You'll talk about it during the show. You're a former Division I baseball player, so you got a lot of and there's a lot of. This is going to be about leadership, and I do see a lot of parallels between sports and leadership. So we'll dig into that a little bit. But I want to get into you personally a little bit. I mean, you've been the CEO of Learnit for like almost 30 years now.
That's unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah.
Last I checked, I was like 18, so that's been a long time.
Yeah, every one of those years doubles. I often say that, you know, I know we sound like old men when we say this, but I look up and like, where did the past 30 years go?
Oh, it's crazy. And I always like to tell people is, especially for younger people, is the importance of being present, because before you know it, you know, time goes really quickly.
Yeah. No, it does. I mean, I remember my mother said this. You'll relate to this. I remember when
Paul,
she was probably.
We still look good.
Yeah,
we still look good. Kind of.
I know it's hard being sex symbols, Damon. I mean, it's you know, it's not easy.
So what did your
work.
mom say? Yeah.
No. She said to me once, probably when she was a little bit younger than I am right now. She said, "You know, I'm surprised every day I look in the mirror because I'm surprised at what I see because I still feel like I'm 16." And at the time I was young, I'm like, "Mom, you're an old lady. What are you talking about?" But now that I'm here, I understand what she means because I still feel like a kid.
So do I. I honestly, I still do. And I think that's good that we feel that way. Now, we talked about this before. I'm 52 years old and I have a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old. So they help keep me young. But I agree. I think my grandfather, who lived to be 101, always said that age is just a number. Don't let it get to you. And so I want to be young at heart.
Yeah, no, I just turned 65, so I can't even believe that number. Like, it's just shocking to me because I look around, I see 20s and 30-year-olds, and I feel like I'm their age. I know they probably don't look at me the same way, but I think that's part of our success is just staying young, staying active, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I got a team of 25, 8-year-olds, and sometimes I forget that I'm, you know, over 2 decades older than them.
Yeah.
You know, but it is what it is, you know, So we just got to make the best out of it and take care of ourselves so we can be around for another, 30 years.
Yeah. So let's get into kind of, the topic of today's leadership. And I know it ties into Learnit. Tell me how you started the company. Tell me a little bit about the genesis and kind of we'll start digging into the whole leadership topic.
So sure. So I didn't start the company. I just,
Okay.
A lot of times people say that. Really what happened was I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and my father, Walt, was in our family was a really large real estate company for several decades. And in the mid-90s, he was trying to find a way to digitize our portfolio. And so he went out, bought a Mac, and he went and took a class. And Paul, you would love my dad. He had short attention span, but a great visionary. And he went to this class. He brought my sister, and they thought it was stale. They thought the instructor was reading from a book. He got up and left after 30 minutes. And like a lot of great entrepreneurs, he said, "There's got to be a better way to do this."
Yeah.
And so what he did is he called up a guy who used to be a CFO of our savings and loan. And he's like, "John, I got this great idea. I want to create a computer training company, and I want the classes to be short. I want them to be cheap so anybody could afford it. And I want it to be a cool environment where people can come, hang out, maybe get a date, and cool instructors like magicians, like a hangout." And so that's really where Learnit started.
Okay.
We had short classes that people could come to. And I just happened to be wrapping up my baseball career. We came to kind of an end. And I was too, I lacked confidence. I didn't know if any of my skills were transferable. So I started as a receptionist June of 1995, Paul. And here I am in 2024.
Wow. Almost 30 years later. Now you're the big dog.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. If you ask my 7-year-old daughter, I work for her. So
yeah. Well, that's
how it goes.
Yeah. No, it's funny. Now we're going to go off topic a little bit here, but I have 3 daughters too. And so I've always said this. I didn't understand women till I had daughters, because it begins at birth with them just wrapping themselves, around your finger, and they own you. They do.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
well, we're completely off subject, but one thing I want to say is that, if it's okay, it's, I having kids later in life, I thought maybe I'd have one. And when we first found out we were having a daughter, I was a little bummed because I wanted a little baseball player.
Sure.
And maybe I didn't behave as well as I should have. As far as emotionally, I was disappointed. You could see it on my face. But the second Lucy came out and I held her in my arms, forget it, Paul.
Yeah.
I was done. And by the time I was, blessed enough we had to have a second child, I told my wife, I hope it's another daughter. I really did, because I love her so much, but I was fortunate it was a boy. But yeah, I could see the wrapping around the finger 100%.
Yeah, they give you those dopey eyes and you can't say no.
Can't say no. There's so many times where I got work stuff going on and Lucy will be like, Daddy, you're not going to come to my cookout? And I'm like, how do I say no to that?
Yeah, you can't.
Can't.
And I think it gets easier once you resign yourself to the fact that they do own us.
Yeah, yeah.
So, well, very good. So, you got your Learnit, but you really, today's topic is going to be leadership, and I know you wrote a book on that, and so what are the basic tenets of what you espouse to the folks out there?
So I wrote a book called The Learn It All Leader. Came out last year, and I got a copy of it right here. You can actually see it. There you go.
All right.
Anyways, I didn't even know if I wanted to write a book. Luckily, my wife convinced me to do it, and I just wanted to share my story. I played for 3 Hall of Fame baseball coaches. I wasn't much of a student in college, and really, the main tenets of the book is really that anybody, if I can do it, if I can do it without a Harvard MBA or anything, you can do it as well, right? And so I break the book down into being and doing. So here's the mindset. And then the second half of the book is some actionable tools. And I'd share my experiences of what I learned from both my father and playing from some Hall of Fame baseball coaches, in hopes that whether you want to be a high school coach, a team leader, or an entrepreneur, that there's something that you could relate to in the book that will give you confidence to grow your self-leadership. And like I say, it's a little cheesy, but I like it. It's great leaders aren't born or made; they're constantly in the making.
Yeah, and I think that's a great line, because I think the leaders that think they know it all are the worst leaders in my mind.
Worst. Yeah.
And
I mean, we all know people who think they know it all, right? You come into a conversation, they even ask you a question like, what do you think about this? And then you give them an answer and they just get defensive and tell you that you're wrong, or they just don't listen. And I don't have a lot of time for those types of people, because I think if you're going to be a great leader in whatever it is you're doing, you have to continually want to learn, evolve, and grow. And also you have to be humble.
Yeah. So when did you start getting serious about, leadership? I mean, obviously, and there's all types of leaders in life, right? You've played a lot of sports, as did I, and there's leaderships on the team, there's coaches. But when did you start to really get involved and think about it seriously?
I would say a couple of years into Learnit, when I was working at the front desk, I could see that the gentleman who was running Learnit wasn't really taking it too seriously. just kind of checking in, checking out. And I didn't think the culture was that great. And, I mean, this is my family's money, my dad's vision. And so I said, hey, I kind of wanted to step up and make sure that this investment didn't go into waste. And also, I realized that it was kind of fun to learn stuff, and it was kind of fun to learn how to lead people. And that's where I started taking it serious. I was always a big book reader. And I would say about 5 years into my journey at Learnit, my dad let that guy go. He was looking for a new leader and a new CEO. And I said, hey, I've taught classes. I've closed our biggest deals. I've helped out with IT. Give me a shot. And so he put me in the role as a CEO, and I just never wanted to let him down, and I enjoyed it. So I just kind of busted my butt to continue to learn, grow, and do the best I could, and make a ton of mistakes along the way.
Yeah. So how much convincing did it take you to convince your father to give you the reins?
It took more time to convince my grandfather. So
really?
my grandfather was a legendary San Francisco guy. He loved me,
Of course he did, yeah.
He loved me. I was the oldest of all his grandchildren, big Italian grandfather. But, he also kind of looked at me as a baseball player, and maybe, as a receptionist or whatever, and didn't know how serious I was. And he was very tight with money, so he didn't want to see this investment in Learn go to waste. So it took time convincing him. My dad was like, hey, you know what? Go for it. I support you. You can do it. And so I just felt like the first year or two was a little bit of pressure trying to get my grandfather to have confidence in me to that I could run the place.
Well, I mean, your technology has changed drastically. When you started that company, there wasn't online presence. There wasn't, now there's so many things on. How's the company doing overall? I mean,
well, that's a great question. I would say in the middle of this year, terrible, because there's a lot of uncertainty in the market. Mm-hmm. And whether it's the election that was coming up, whatever it was, a lot of times when there's uncertainty, companies pull back on spending on investing in training and stuff like that. So we had a dip, but as we're recording this in November 2024, we had a good couple months, and we're looking to finish the year strong. So I think companies always we do all B2B training, so I think great companies know that if they want to hire and retain great talent, they have to invest in them. And so I think that what Learnit does and what other training organizations do is critical to company success.
Yeah. Is there a specialty that you focus on, or is it law? Is it healthcare? Is it technology? What do you guys focus on?
So I would say, from a customer perspective, it's autonomous, right? So we work with all different types of industries, healthcare, finance, everything. As far as the courses we offer, it's mostly, even though I don't like the term, it's soft skills. How to become more self-awareness, having difficult conversations, time management, all those types of skills that you need in the day-to-day world. Plus, on the other side of the fence, we also do, and it still sells out all the time, Microsoft Excel, PowerPoint. Sure. Yeah. So we do all those types of training, and I would say about 90% of what we do is virtual versus in person.
Yeah, nice. That's where the technology's changed over the last 10, 15 years even.
And more so coming up.
Yeah. So how do you feel your baseball career has helped you in this journey?
That's a good question. I think that I didn't realize it at the time. I went all in on baseball. I was a high school American. I got drafted a couple times. Once by, I don't know if you're a Yankees fan, but by Yankees and Atlanta Braves. Red Sox. And so I didn't realize at the time that what I was learning, that what I learned playing baseball and from the coaches I played for, all those skills were transferable to the next part of my life. My baseball career ended when I was 22. I was shocked. I thought that I would get drafted and move on. And so I kind of like always identified as a baseball player. I didn't know what I was going to do with myself. But now as I look back, in sports, you learn teamwork, collaboration, persistence, discipline, all that kind of stuff. So it's been a game changer. I like to call it athletic education. And I don't think that there's too many different types of education that are any better than what you get from learning how to play sports.
Yeah. And if you look at sports, team sports, I should say, there's a lot of kind of parallels to the corporate world, right? I mean, you got teammates that you have to get along with. You have a coach that you've got to get along with. You've got management that you got to get along. So it's a lot of variables that it's not like tennis or golf, right? Where you're a one-man show. So
totally. And I wasn't much of a golfer. I wish I was, but I'm sure that there's a lot of skills that you learn as well for your professional career. But 100%, you have to learn how to collaborate. If the guy hitting before me strikes out with the bases loaded, I gotta have his back come up and get a hit. If we make mistakes, we got to cover for other people. You want to be able to trust your teammates. You want to trust your manager. You got to have a great vision. These are all things that I learned playing from 3 fabulous Hall of Fame baseball coaches. But I also played for terrible coaches, Paul. And I mean, I think you and I even spoke about some of those when we first met. And you could learn a lot from them. You could really learn what not to do from a terrible coach.
Yeah. And in business, right, we've all had, I've said this many, many times. I've said it on this show many times that, if you look at the leaders in life that you would run through a wall for today and the ones that you wouldn't, there's some common threads between both, right? And there's some people that I haven't spoken to them in 10, 15, 20 years that if they call me up today and I'd say, what do you need? How can I help? Just to that, I have that feeling for them that I know they had my back 100% of the time. And
I love that.
And to this day, there's leaders that I know from 30 years ago that I still think of them today and say, how would they handle the situation? All right. And that's a testament to them. So yeah, we just, the journey of, I wish, the old adage, I wish I knew then what I knew now, but there's no way to do that, right? You can't transplant that knowledge in your younger self, I don't think.
Well, no, and there's really no reason to look back at that point anyways, right? It's take it all from here. But what I love that you're saying, and for your listeners out there who are parents or maybe leaders, I think about some of the great coaches I had, going all the way back to my coach, John DeVos, in high school. He believed in me, and there were times when I was down on myself and he'd pull me aside and he'd say, hey kid, look what you accomplished. You did this, this, and this. And, and that goes for parents too. It's like, I don't think people realize how important it is to be able to share with others who maybe don't see it in themselves, like help bring out some of that greatness in people. And I think about, whether it's John DeVos, my mom or dad, or Coach Annie Lopez, I think I'm a different person now because I had people growing up that believed in me and helped me stretch and become more than maybe I thought I was, even capable of doing.
Yeah. That's a great point. I sometimes, I think back to my life and career, and sometimes the one of the regrets I have is that I didn't kind of extend myself. I didn't stick my neck out far enough at times. Now, looking back, I wish I had. But again, that's easy to say now at the end of my career than the beginning, right? You're always afraid to take chances and stick your neck out there and kind of get into that getting out of your comfort zone, I guess is the way to put it. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with you 100%. And there's a lot of things that I look back there where I wish I would have taken the opportunity that I didn't. Anything from, I don't know, asking some girl out that maybe I was afraid to get shot down to, trying out for a specific team or rolling out a product at Learnit where I was afraid of failure. Yeah. And I think that that's one of the nice things about getting older, Paul, is through experience. Sometimes you realize that at this point, I'm kind of like, I'll try whatever, I'll get out of my comfort zone and look at everything as a learning opportunity. And if I fail, so what? Somebody laughs at me or whatever, if it's something that I can recover from, who cares? do the best you can do. And also, I think it's important to get out of your comfort zone and pat yourself on the back for trying. Because, Paul, most people don't have the guts to try anything new or different.
Yeah. So that leads me, and you're a podcaster. So how did you feel the time you released your first podcast? Because I know how I felt.
Well, I think it's funny. It wasn't releasing my first podcast. The first time I was a guest on a podcast was on this guy, Andy Storch's show. And about 2 years ago, I was scared to death, and if I watched back that episode, and I'm friends with Andy now. He was just on my show about 6 months ago, and I was horrible. I looked like I was scared to death, you know. And but you fast forward a year and a half, 2 years. I'm not saying I'm great. I'm not saying I'm good, but if you want to get better at something, you just got to keep doing it over and over and over. And but not only that, I'm lucky. I have this training company where we teach public speaking and everything, but I'm constantly asking people who work for me. I'm like, how did I do on this question? What could I do differently? And I create an environment where they feel comfortable to give me advice, and I take that advice and I try to make it better. And I mean, even to this day, I don't like listening to myself talk.
No one does. Yeah.
No one does. But, and then when I started hosting our podcast, I don't know, about a year ago, I look back at how I was then to how I am now, and I feel like I'm much better at it. And it's just a learning process, but I'm proud of that I did it.
Yeah. And if you're anything like me, and I actually, the reception I got when I first came out with it was way better than I thought it was going to be. Like, so many people said to me, wow, that's great, Dee, because the reality is most people don't have the guts to do one.
100%. Most people don't have the guts to get out there and try things. So if you do and you fall on your face, again, so what? Learn from it and do it better next time.
Yeah. So, well, hey, so let's dig into the, what you do for, you're an author, and what you do for a living as far as, great leaders and all that. And so what do you think the biggest qualities are in a lifelong leader? What do you think they all share in common?
I think that the qualities or the traits that the best leaders share, I mean, I think there's 5 of them. Humility, you got to be humble. Integrity, I think great leaders, you have to lead with integrity. You got to do the right thing. Accountability, you got to take ownership. I think great leaders aren't victims. They're not on the victim mode. You got to have courage. And what I mean by courage is, like we just talked about, stepping out of your comfort zone, making tough decisions. And I think one that's super important is curiosity. You got to be curious, ask great questions, learn, want to, be involved in innovation, whatever it is, right? So I think that those are really the skills that I've seen of people I've worked with over the years and that coached of great leaders.
Yeah. So if I got a question for you as far as what you can learn from a leader when things are bad and when things are good, because I see differences. What are your thoughts on that? I'd like to hear your opinion.
Yeah. So going back to, what I learned from poor leaders. I mean, I had this one baseball coach, doesn't matter who it is. He is a big league manager right now, which is surprising to me. When things were going good, Paul, he was out front taking all the credit.
Sure.
It was like, it was the lineup decisions I made. It was the pitching changes. It was whatever, right? Taking all the credit. When things went bad, he was saying things like, well, how do you expect us to win if our 4th up hitter struck out with the bases loaded in the 7th inning? And that, a lot of times that was me, and I just think I remember sitting there in the locker room one day and I was thinking to myself, if I ever lead a team, or I'm never going to be that guy, I'm not going to be the guy that makes it all about me when things are good. I want to make it about my team. But I'm also not going to be that guy who's being a victim or he's passing the blame off to somebody. I think you just got to look in the mirror and take ownership. And I also think the difference between a great leader and a poor leader is when times get tough, which they all do, is that leader stepping up to the plate? Are they vulnerable enough to say, "Hey, look, I don't have all the answers, but we're going to figure this out," or are they hiding behind a curtain somewhere and just hoping things get better?
Yeah.
When times are tough, leaders got to be out front, and they got to make their team feel confident that may not know the right direction to get there, but we are going to do this together, and we're going to find out how to get there.
Yeah. No, and I'll dovetail on that, Damon, is I always felt the good leaders when times were tough were like, hey, we've got a plan. We know it's going to work. We had maybe a rough quarter, but we're going to stay the course, keep doing what we're doing, maybe tweak it a little bit, versus the ones that just point fingers and blame and start firing people. I mean,
100%.
That's one of the threads I've seen in good leadership. And I can, I'm not going to name names today, but I've got a few in mind right now that, again, I would run through a wall for today because of situations like that. Like, hey, orders pushed, we'll get them next quarter. Don't worry about it. Just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, and that's what's so great, right? Because let's say you don't hit your numbers, and your manager has to go talk to their VP, and instead of throwing you under the bus and saying, "Hey, well, Paul's activity was down. He didn't do this. He didn't do that," he's like, "Hey, you know what? Paul and I went all in on this deal. It didn't happen, but we're going to figure out how to hit our numbers next quarter. And I don't want you to get pissed at Paul. If you want to say anything, talk to me about it because he's part of my team and I own our team's results."
Yeah,
you'll
that's
run
leadership,
through a wall
right?
for that guy. That's leadership.
That's leadership. Yeah. So I have a funny story for you. Every time I have someone like you on the show, I relate it to my career. This just recently,
Good.
I heard this story. No names. A friend of mine works for an organization, and everyone on the team hates the leader. Everyone on the team hates the manager. So they did this internal audit where they pulled all the reps, and they gave this guy incredibly bad reviews and incredibly with all these recommendations. So, and they gave it to the manager, which I've never heard of before, but it's amazing they did that. So and I'm talking upper management gave it to him. Mm-hmm. The next meeting, he said, "Look, I read all your input, and I've been doing this a long time. I'm not changing anything I'm doing." Yeah. And that was shocking to me that he just didn't even look at it intelligently and say, "Yeah, maybe I need to make some changes." And say, he just came in defiant, like, "No,
he's a know-it-all."
He's a know-it-all. That's where I was going with this. To use your term, he's a know-it-all, not a learn-it-all.
No, he's a know-it-all, and unfortunately, there's too many people out there like that. I mean, a story kind of in a similar vein is there's this gentleman I know who, I don't know, he a friend of mine, I mean, and he very sharp guy, he's been successful in sales. He's doing consulting, and he called me up about a month ago, and he said, "My client told me that I'm a little too aggressive on calls, that I don't listen well, and that I'm, I don't know, just abrupt, And I said, "Okay, what did you?" He's like, "What do you think I should do?" And I said, "You should say thank you for giving me that feedback."
Great feedback. Yeah.
Because I know it must be difficult for you to get out of your comfort zone to tell me this feedback. And before I could even finish what I had to say, Paul, he cut me off and he's like, "That's BS. I am who I am. I've been super successful. This is why I've been successful. When she hired me, she should have known this is what she was getting." I'm just thinking to myself, why am I wasting my time talking to this person? Right?
100%.
And then 2 months later, he lost his consulting gig. And of course, not only did he lose his consulting gig, he blames it on, the market, the economy, we weren't making any deals. No, you lost it because the CEO who brought you in gave you feedback on how she wanted you to speak with your customers. And instead of thanking her and trying to make an adjustment, you just said, just like your guy did, Paul, "Hey, This is how I've always been. This is how I'm going to continue to be." Doesn't get anybody anywhere.
I guess if you got enough money in the bank, you don't care anymore, right? But if you actually care about your career and the way people look at you and look up to you, that may be different.
Yes, but I also, and from having the opportunity to be around some very successful people, and also over the last year on my show, the Learn It All podcast, interviewing some super successful people, those people tend to be some of the most humble that I've ever met, and the most curious, and always looking to grow and evolve. So yeah, sure, there are plenty of men and women who have a ton of money who are jerks, but there's also a lot who know that they always want to continue evolving and growing, and aren't jerks.
Yeah. What does a leader have to do to create a great culture in an organization? What do you think of the traits there? I know we touched on a little bit of that earlier, but in like some specific things they can do to create that really uplifting, positive environment where people can grow.
I think it's a great question. And what I say, that the number one thing that leaders need to do to create a great culture is to model the behavior that they want their employees, how they want their employees to behave, right? You can't, say one thing and do something else, right? So whatever your values are, your core values that you put on the wall, you have to live those values. And then you need to hold everybody else accountable to those values, right? So you can't, I've had high performers in the past who were toxic to the environment, right? I mean, whether they're bullies or whatever. And I learned the hard way sometimes by keeping them around too long, and that hurts your culture, right? Yeah. So you want to have, I look at an organization, Paul, as a team, not a family, right? I mean, you can't fire Uncle Bob, right? But if you're a baseball team or you're an organization, your responsibility as a leader is to put the best people on the field at all time that fit, the direction and the vision you have. And then I'm also a big believer of, when possible, bringing in people maybe who don't have the most experience, but they have the right attitude and aptitude, and you give them the opportunity to learn and grow, and make mistakes and have their backs and believe in them. And if you do all of that, if you weed out the bad seeds, if you lead by example, if you lead with integrity, and I'm not talking woo-woo stuff, I'm talking about, really, say what you're going to, say something and do it, and give people the opportunity to learn and grow. And sometimes these people outgrow your organization. They might be there for 4 years or 9 months these days, who knows, but ended on good terms. And then the next thing you know, I mean, Learnit gets all our new hires typically from people referring people to me who used to work for me, because they're like, this is the type of leader Damon is. This is the type of person who will thrive in his organization. And it's going to be a great learning opportunity for the time you're there. Because he gives you an opportunity. He doesn't put you in a box and not give you chances to learn and grow. So at the end of the day, I like to call it like a learn it all culture. You're giving people the opportunity to learn from their mistakes, try things, and have their back.
Yeah, and that creates loyalty too, right?
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. So
at the end of the day, you want it to be an organization where people buy into the purpose of what you're doing, right? So like, okay, I believe in what we're doing here. And also that it's more than a paycheck. Paul, I tell people, if you're walking to work, or now you're on Zoom and you're like, I don't want to be here anymore. Well, go talk to your manager, or come talk to me, and let's figure out if we could put you in a different position, or if we just help you transition out, right? And so if you could have that kind of transparent communication and people feel respected and heard, it absolutely creates loyalty.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I would think that's rare though, Damon. I mean, just, having that relationship with management, saying, hey, it's not working out here. If I can stay, I could like the company, but I don't like my role. I think that's a hard conversation to have. Most people would struggle with that, I think.
Yes, I think I think that you're right. And I think even worse though Another example I have is somebody I know works at this organization where you have to be a yes man. So it's a 1,000-person company. And if you don't agree with the CEO, you could lose your job, right? If you come to him and say, I don't agree with this, right? You could lose your job. And I had lunch with a friend. She actually used to work for me. And I said, how are you doing at this organization? And she's like, I actually left. I'm like, why would you leave? And she said, because I got a new manager. I didn't really get along with them. And I didn't want to bring it up to HR or to anybody because I was afraid I was going to lose my job. And so by her not feeling comfortable to bring up what was going on, Paul, guess what? They lost their number one producer. Right. She went someplace else because great people, even in a tough market, can get jobs, right? Yeah. So
I'd agree.
I'm not going to say that I got everything figured out, but I feel like I've had multiple employees. I got about 70 employees now, but who've come to me over the years. And I talk about it in my book, this woman, Carly Lutz, she came to me, very talented. And she's like, I enjoy Learnit. I enjoy the culture we have here. I just don't want to do sales, and I was a little taken back because we spent, invested in her and everything. But instead of getting upset, I got curious and I just said, well, where do you think you could add value? And so she came a couple of days later with a business plan to start an online community. And I'm like, man, that's great. And so in this situation, I gave her the opportunity. She worked here for 2 years. Carly and I are really close. She doesn't work here anymore, but that's an example right there where I'm glad she came to me, and I'm glad we were able to figure out what her passions and strengths were and align them with what we needed at Learnit. So I think that if you create a psychologically safe environment where people feel like that they can share without getting reprimanded, I think especially the younger generations, right? Yeah. They're a little bit more open to telling you how they feel. So if you take that and you do something with it, I think that you'll be much better off culture wise.
Yeah, that's a great point, by the way, about the younger generation. And I would agree with you that they have no problem like telling you how they feel, I think. And versus when we were growing up, if you had a rough environment, you were taught you got to suck it up. You got to make it work. You got to, you do your time, all those cliches that these kids don't want to hear. Yeah. But in a way, I kind of commend them, right? If they're not happy, they're like, I'm making changes, so it is what it is.
Here's what I'll say. One of the first things after I get done doing a keynote or working with a client is there's 5 or 6 generations in the workforce. And they'll be like, how do we manage these younger generations? And, sometimes they come across as entitled or they're not afraid to speak their mind. I say, first and foremost, Paul, to people our age, those are our kids. They could be our kids, right? So it started at home. But more importantly, I think that these younger generations, they have a ton to offer. They really do. They're much more savvy when it comes to technology and stuff like that.
Yep. Agreed.
And on top of it, if somebody speaking their mind, maybe I don't necessarily love it, but it pushes me to be a better leader. It pushes me to be more clear on my vision, my direction, and sharing with them the purpose. So instead of getting frustrated, at least outwardly, it helps me refine and hone my skills as a leader. So I think that, all generations, have things to offer, and having a diverse workforce, even in that sense, is super important.
Yeah. No, it's a great point. We have some young folks at our company, and I actually enjoy interacting with them. I've always said that, I don't want to ever be one of those old guys that thinks they know it all, use one of your phrases. And you can always learn from the young. They have all great ideas. They're very creative, much more creative than I was when I was that age. So always can learn.
Yeah, you could always learn. I'll never forget. We had an office in Arizona one time, and I was a younger manager, younger leader, and I was up on the whiteboard with my sales manager, and we were going through some techniques. And this lady who was probably 15 years older than me turned to somebody else in the room and said, what is this guy going to teach me about sales? I was doing sales when he was still in 8th grade, right?
Yeah.
She didn't make it too much longer in an organization, not because I didn't like what she said to me, but it's because she had that mentality where she had it all figured out and she wasn't open to learning. Because what worked 15 years ago in sales, and you know this, Paul, it ain't working today.
No, it's a different
landscape.
time today.
Yeah, it's a different time.
Well, Damon, I think you and I personally could probably speak for another hour, but we'll kind of end it on that. And but if someone wanted to get your book or get in touch with your company, how would they do that?
So I would say first connect with me on LinkedIn, Damon Lembi. I'm pretty active out there on LinkedIn. My book is The Learn It All Leader. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. And do me a favor, if you get a chance, check out my podcast, the Learn It All podcast. I have a good time interviewing athletes, leaders, all kinds of people.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to do that. So,
well, your book's in the mail, Paul. Hopefully you get it pretty soon.
I will, and I'm gonna read it for sure.
It'll help you go to sleep at night, maybe. No, I'm teasing.
No, I don't. Believe it or not, when I read in the morning at like 5 o'clock.
Me too.
Like I'm an early riser when I get up, and I have a nice, comfortable chair in my office. I'll read for an hour or something, and instead of watching like turn on the news and all the mayhem that's going on in the world, I'll read a little bit.
And doing something good with your time. I agree. Right. And for your listeners out there, you don't even have to do it for an hour. You can do it for 30 minutes, 20 minutes. It's a great learning opportunity for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll call it. We'll end it on that note, Damon. Thanks for being on the show. Really enjoyed it. I love the topic of, we covered a lot of things today. Actually went off track a little bit, but always fun topics. And I really enjoyed having you on the show.
Well, I appreciate you having me. It was an honor to be here, and I really enjoyed our conversation.
All right. Well, thank you. And so that's it for another edition of the Business Brains and the Bottom Line podcast. Paul D'Allegro. Until next time.